The year is 2005. We're deep into the 6th generation of consoles, and gaming is doing pretty good. So far this year, I've gotten to play Devil May Cry 3 and Resident Evil 4 on my PlayStation 2. And for my Xbox, Splinter Cell Chaos Theory and Doom 3 finally got ported, so I'm playing that as well. It is so great to have so much money to buy all of these games. Surely there'd be no financial crisis in the future or anything. In fact, the future looks bright for gaming. We've been holding on to this 6th generation of consoles for a while now, and games have only looked better and better. But I think it's time we ask, what's next? And the answer to that may not exactly be what I'm hoping for. See, I should specify that this is May of 2005, and I'm sitting down to watch the unveiling of the next generation. Oh my god, is that Elijah Wood from The Lord of the Rings?
The future of gaming.
Over the next month, more next-gen consoles would be unveiled, like the PS3 and the Wii, and with that, the clock started ticking down towards the 7th generation of consoles. While that's great for the plethora of new games that are sure to come out, you see, during this 6th generation of consoles, and essentially most of the early 2000s, games cost about $40 to $50. Obviously, that's in USD and without counting for taxes, but they weren't $60. Not yet. That is until November 22nd, 2005, when Call of Duty 2 was released onto a console alongside the launch of the Xbox 360. Now, this wasn't the first ever $60 game in the early 2000s. A game called SOCOM US Navy SEALs came out in 2002 and was priced at $60. But that was because it came bundled with a cheap headset. No, Call of Duty 2 set the standard for this next generation of gaming to be priced at $60. While there was, of course, some pushback, which I'll talk about in a bit, it's undeniable that there was a jump in quality to the 7th generation. Games were longer, had more content than ever, told better stories, and looked better than ever while doing it. Publishers told people that games needed to cost more because they were getting more expensive to make, and it clearly showed in the end product. Putting 2 scarabs on screen in Halo 3, stepping outside of the vault for the first time in Fallout 3, or falling out of a plane in Uncharted 3. Lots of 3s here. All of that couldn't have been done in the 6th generation, and sold the idea that these games are worth $60 now. Before I get too deep, let me just mention that game prices are expensive pretty much everywhere else save for a few countries that aren't America. I am aware. This video is made from an American perspective, so I'm sorry to foreign viewers. If you live in a country where games are either already $70 or perhaps even more, I'm sorry. A few countries off the dome, shout out Canada, shout out Turkey, shout out the Philippines, shout out Australia, and shout out New Zealand. You guys get forgot a lot. Let's get back to what I was talking about. The 8th generation of consoles. With the release of the Xbox One and PS4, the cost of development and size of games exploded. In 2010, big budget games were averaging $30 million to make. In 2014, they could get up to $68 million, and by 2020, we knew that big games were hitting hundreds of millions of dollars on average to develop. Not too long ago, I uploaded a video about just how large games have gotten and why. And not to repeat everything, but just to give you an idea. In 2014, we were complaining about 40 gigabyte game downloads. And then just 4 years later, the biggest game of that year hit 120 gigabytes to download. It soon became obvious that studios dumping hundreds of millions of dollars and tens of thousands of hours into one project couldn't continue without something changing. And so, in 2020, 2K and their parent company Take-Two were the first to bravely announce to the world that we would like more money, actually. NBA 2K21, a true next-gen experience priced at $70. Setting the standard that for the 9th generation of consoles, games are $70 now. And that's pretty much where we are today. Big budget AAA titles that pull in the big bucks for major gaming publishers are $70. Heading towards the end of Big 24, which is when this video is uploaded by the way, we've seen games like the Silent Hill 2 remake, Black Ops 6, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, all at $70. We're still waiting on Indiana Jones and probably a few other games in 2025 I'm not mentioning, all of which are set to launch at $70. I'd certainly say backlash to this has been pretty vocal online, but it's really up in the air if it's affected the sales of games in some meaningful way. And I'd probably lean towards it hasn't, maybe? If there's one thing I am certain of, is that backlash to the jump from 60 to 70 has certainly been worse than the backlash from 50 to 60. See, I said I was going to talk about it earlier, and here I am talking about it. I told you. Well, it's certainly hard to even find discussion about things like this online because it happened in 2005. The threads I have managed to find seem to find the jump from 50 to 60 bad for them because it means they're less likely to buy a game day one. Not that they're entirely put off from buying games anyway. And on top of that, there's significantly fewer people saying the games aren't worth $60, which is arguably the largest criticism of this generation's recent price hike. Let's take NBA 2K21 for example here, considering it's the game to set the $70 standard. What makes this release worth $10 more compared to its previous outing, NBA 2K20? Here's a list of differences I noticed as someone unfamiliar with the franchise. When the news broke that 2K21 would cost $70, David Ismailer, the president of 2K, defended the decision by saying the price reflects the high-quality experience you get. And of course by this, I assume he means the high-quality, high-price microtransactions, maybe even the loot boxes. How about the high-quality, unskippable commercial ads that were added to the game a month after launch accidentally? Or, and this might just be a little outside-the-box thinking here, maybe David is referring to the fact the 2K21 experience is so high quality that you simply can't experience it anymore. A game released in 2020 is no longer available for you to purchase digitally on Steam. In fact, the multiplayer servers were shut down at the end of 2022, and the game no longer receives any kind of official support. Because of this dependency on the servers, you can't play the offline campaign mode. It's gone. This game is nowhere near worth $70, obviously, but it's not hard to see this situation creep into many other big budget AAA games released recently. While there's certainly nothing quite as egregious as NBA 2K for $70, which they're still doing by the way, it's not hard to find other greedy or half-baked experiences littering what should be a quality price point. And I can already see someone who, from what my statistics tell me, is the rare 38 to 45-year-old male viewer I have, commenting, gaming has always been like this, and there's always been duds at $50, $60, or $70. And that's true, I agree. I'd argue though that we have a lot less AAA games releasing now than back then. Taking Rockstar Games for example, in between GTA 4 and GTA 5, Rockstar released 4 console games, 3 DLCs, and I'm not even gonna count whatever DS or iOS games came out, sorry. In between GTA 5 and the yet to be released GTA 6, Rockstar has released 1 console game. It's not like they weren't doing anything. I'm not sitting here calling Rockstar lazy. They were just busy developing the most detailed and immersive open world of all time. At least perhaps until GTA 6 comes out, who knows. I'd love to sit here and say that games cost so much now because every $70 game is a high quality labor of love that costs $200 million to develop and spent 5 to 8 years in the oven. But I can't say that because we don't even have a concrete answer as to why the 9th generation games are more expensive. I mean, we can speculate, but the real answer lies somewhere in a foggy 3-way trifecta between absurd development costs, inflation, and just straight up corporate greed. I think tackling each of these reasons separately would be the best way to present this. Beginning with inflation, this is the one that seems the most ironclad as a response. Inflation calculators for US currency are easily found online, and it clearly shows paying $60 for a game in 2019 would be like spending $73 today. It's even worse if you go back to the year 2005, because then that means $60 games should cost nearly $100. The main response I've seen to this is that gaming has also exploded, incredibly large. There are more gamers than ever, and the gaming industry is more profitable than ever. Year over year, you see how franchises are breaking records, selling the most they've ever had in history. So does it still make sense to raise game prices for the 9th generation if companies are pulling in more than ever from gamers? And this is where greed gets involved, because if games are so profitable year over year, why are we paying more for them?
Pre-order the Vault Edition today. Pre-order now. Pre-order the Vault Edition now. Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Pre-order now.
Especially when a large majority of games nowadays come jam-packed full of live service elements and microtransactions. I've talked about battle passes and how stupid they can be on my channel before, but I really need to hammer it in here that $70 on top of the usual live service elements we know today is egregious. I will happily say right now that if a game is entirely single player, I don't have an issue with spending $70. Now hold on a second, I'm not saying every single player $70 priced game is worth that amount. You don't have to pause the video to go out and buy Starfield for full price right now. There's always been games at full price that aren't worth it, no matter what the standard price of a video game is. What I am saying is that, for example, a game like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, or Tears of the Kingdom, or Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, games that charge you up front and then can, or sometimes do, offer upwards of 100 hours of entertainment with no other monetization schemes besides perhaps some erroneous additions that for some reason swap around content. Stupid, but whatever. Games like that are, in my opinion, worth $70. Does everyone agree with that? Perhaps not. But you can buy all of these games used now at a discounted price within at most a year of release. It shouldn't be, and isn't, an unpopular opinion that yearly sports games or COD releases priced at $70 isn't worth it. MW3 especially is just so egregious because they didn't even have the flimsy excuse Black Ops 6 has with being on Game Pass. You're paying $70 for a largely multiplayer experience. Yes, I am aware of MW3's campaign and all 5 people who bought the game for the thrilling conclusion to the most 4 out of 10 story of all time. It was 4 hours long, and they only had 16 months to make it. We get it, we heard the message loud and clear. The multiplayer is clearly the only thing that matters to Activision, especially when you boot up the game and get bombarded with advertisements begging you to spend money on the battle pass or at least one cosmetic. You know, live service games usually slash the price of the game itself to drive people into the store, or at the very least understand that for a largely repetitive multiplayer experience, a price like $40 is a lot more fair to the consumer. Like, MW3 came out November 10th of 2023, and within the 51 days left in the year, was still the second best-selling game of 2023. $70 my ass. Greed all the way down. There's no other reason for stuff like that. And now we're here at development costs. And to me, this is actually the most ironclad argument for the reason games cost more money now. Critiquing this point requires looking at how massive video game publishers run their companies and how they prioritize what ideas to turn into games and push out the door. We are deep in an era where a game's success is essentially measured on if it makes the top 10 best-selling games of the year. Because even if a game does sell well, the studio might still go under anyway. And you have to ask yourself, did that studio fail because games cost so much money to make now? Or did that studio get shuttered because Xbox, which is essentially just Microsoft now, a company with a $3 trillion market cap, is looking to recoup costs by laying off employees and shuttering studios in the wake of spending $69 billion acquiring Activision Blizzard? The next time you look at the price of a COD game and think that the excuse for it might be development costs or inflation, ask yourself why they gave the price of a whole COD game plus $100 million extra to Bobby fucking Kotick for leaving the company. What this really boils down to for me is, who's asking for games to cost this much to develop? How realistic do games truly need to be before the amount of money you're sinking into the project just doesn't make sense anymore? Do these game companies really need to spend the amount of money they have left to give to studios remastering games less than a decade old? Would that price really not be better spent funding a fun, new experience and taking a chance on it selling like hotcakes? Even in this forum thread from 2007, many gamers discussed ways to make gaming cheaper. From recommendations like holding out for sales, trading, renting, and one user even discussing the possibilities that game companies should look into other sources of revenue to offset the cost fronted to the consumer. If only you knew the Pandora's box you were talking about, Campster. Much of that landscape has lived on through new means that some people certainly don't know about or just straight up might not have access to. Holding out for sales is still valid. Game renting has kind of become Game Pass, although your selections are limited and it's not really the same. And buying used games has shifted to shopping on eBay or going on sites like Green Man Gaming for cheaper digital codes. The only one that's truly died seems to be trading physical copies of games in, because unless you are lucky enough to have a local game store willing to give you an actual worthwhile price for your trade-ins, GameStop remains the GOAT at offering $2.87, some lint, and $7 in Kohl's Cash for that brand new, unopened PS5 game. It seems that in the 9th generation of consoles, it's never been more beneficial than now to be a patient gamer and simply wait for $70 games to drop in prices. There's an article I found while making this video that I'd love to quote here. The year is 2003. In this NBC News article, Tom Loftus talks about the possibility of an increase in the price of games coming in the next generation, from $49.99 to $59.99. The quote I'm most interested in from this article is all the way at the end. Tom says, ultimately, a price increase may rest with the customers. If one publisher sells a hot new title for $60 a pop and makes a killing, publishers with similar titles may follow. But if consumers determine that the gameplay can't match the price hike, well, hell hath no fury like a gamer's spurn. While some people have made it known by saying aloud that the current standards for gameplay aren't matching the extra $10 we're paying per game, it seems not everyone is spurned and on the same page. As of now, $70 games are incredibly profitable, with no sign of that stopping anytime soon. Perhaps, if rumors are true, for GTA 6 ushering in yet another price increase for games due to its estimated and rumored $2 billion development cost, gamers might truly feel spurned. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and make sure to click on the end screen to watch another.